Welcome to the Year in Review podcast for 2022.
Yes, definitely. So in 2021, there was a lot of money available in the market because same story, investors kept their money back in beginning of 2020 and then started to invest all of that money that they kept for their portfolio companies originally because no one knew how to deal with the crisis.
As we say goodbye to the past year and look ahead to the future, I'm excited to reflect on the successes and learnings of the past 12 months and discuss what we can expect from 2023. I have invited an amazing lineup of speakers from 95 previous podcast episodes. To conclude the year and kick off 2023, each speaker will be featured in their own podcast episode, sharing their successes and learnings from 2022 and give a very personal outlook for their 2023. First up, we have Kurt Höller, the Director of Business Creation at EIT Health, joining us. EIT Health is a leading healthcare initiative that supports over 750 startups and provides access to key players in the industry. Kurt has a huge wealth of experience in healthcare, including founding and directing several companies, and has a strong background in research with a focus on health innovation. Kurt will be sharing his most memorable moments from 2022, his biggest private and business successes and learnings, and his expectations for 2023. We will also be discussing EIT Health and getting an overview of the LSG2G community. In the coming days, please check the podcast channel. We have a full schedule of speakers lined up, including Caroline Heil from the New Meat Company, Albert Mispichler, a business angel, Lina Toro and Mauricio Agudelo from Healthtech, Kimberly Cornfield from UCL, Colin Ewald from ETH Zurich, Guido Gualdoni from GSD Antivirals, and Thomas Schubert from TwoBind. In these short episodes, we'll be tackling questions such as what excited you the most in 2022 and what should change in 2023. I hope you enjoy this exciting Year in Review event and the insights and perspectives shared by our speakers. So then let's go back. I went to OpenAI today. I have to just find my way back to my sheet. And just out of curiosity, asked the question, can you recommend some questions for the podcast recording afterwards? And it's like this feeling, Commodore C64 back in the 80s, there is this cursor blinking in the middle of the screen. And I typed in the question and then nothing happens. So I sat there and saw the cursor blinking. It's like someone leaning back, thinking about the question, and then suddenly the artificial intelligence starts typing. And what I find amazing is that they not just throw the content at the person, it's really very slow, readable pace, word after word, and it immediately hooked me. So it's really fantastic. And the result of the question, which questions can I ask in the Year in Review recording, are these 9 questions. These 9 questions.
It's funny that it's like one year behind, right? So talking about 2021, that's a funny side effect of that.
They have unfortunately a cut off in the engine. They stated very often when you ask a question about 2022, no, unfortunately, our programmers decided that it's just going until the end of 2021. Maybe we can find a conspiracy theory behind it, but
all possible, yes, indeed.
So, but enough about me. Good. It's good to see you again. How are you doing?
Good, pretty good. Of course, times are challenging and not easy. So we will go through that. 2021 was definitely 2022. Now I'm almost behind like the AI machine. 2022 was definitely not the easiest year, but in principle, all fine. Everyone healthy, everyone pretty well set up. So all good.
How was your 2022? What were the highlights in this year?
So yeah, starting with private life after 2 boys, and the oldest one already went to school. So that was actually also a very memorable moment. But the most important one is that after these 2 boys, we got a daughter in April. So definitely an amazing and a great moment in private life, I would say.
When did you get your daughter?
In April.
Oh, so, it's great. Spring. It's middle of spring. That's fantastic.
And indeed, after the 2 boys, I was a bit afraid of getting a 3rd boy. No offense to anyone in the audience, but boys are definitely challenging, especially in that age. But having a daughter makes us very happy. I have to admit.
What's her name?
Anneli. Anneli is the first name, and Cosima is the second one. Anneli Cosima.
That's great. So she's basically, it's her first Christmas, and it's 7 months, isn't it?
8 months. No,
8 months. Wow, time flies.
Yeah, very, very young. 6 years, 4 years, and 8 months.
That's great. Let me ask you about the challenges in your professional life. EIT Health. What was going on in 2022?
Wow. EIT Health, of course, is an international network. It's really important to have a close collaboration across borders. And if you talk about challenges, then this collaboration is still not possible the way it happened before. So we live in a new normal. We were able to travel, at least in most cases. You also might have experienced that airplanes and airports did not go up to speed like before COVID. So travel was still restricted. And if you managed to book a flight, then you still had to wait in long queues, and things did not happen and work as planned. But it was possible to meet again in person, but not to the extent that we had before. So the team still suffered from that. The team spirit among the whole community, that's definitely not easy. And that's something that we still have to overcome. Nevertheless, I think there's people are happy that it now starts again, that we can meet. We are setting up programs. We are setting up new initiatives at EIT Health, especially, for example, the flagship initiative that we have, where we try to align better with the other EU institutions. So far, we implemented most things ourselves, and now the focus is really on getting synergies from everything that the European Commission provides and does. So that's definitely one challenge, but on the other hand, a great opportunity to now be able to do that.
You mentioned the pandemic, that the pandemic is over. And that's still challenging. When I look at your newsfeed in LinkedIn, it looked to me, I think it was every day. It felt like every day that you post a new picture from an event where you have been. How were your events like? How was your event life this year?
Very, very good question. We had significantly less events,
really?
even if it took up again compared to 2021, but. Compared to 2019, my travel was still limited. So I was like not traveling every day like I did before 2020. In 2022, it was still definitely less. But there have been some really outstanding and amazing events. So the first one was, or one of the most important ones, was our EIT Health Summit. So we didn't have a summit in 2020 and 2021. In 2022, we had our first summit since 2 years. That's where the whole EIT Health community comes together, where we have more than 1,000 representatives of the different partners. EIT Health is a partnership of more than 250 associated and core partners all over Europe. They all came together and were really celebrating that moment of being together again. We had the finals of our Health Catapult, of our internal business plan competition that I was able to moderate again. And being back on such a big stage in May was the first time for 2 years. That was really outstanding. So that was definitely a great event. By the way, that was the moment when Jean-Marc, our new interim CEO, announced that I would take over the investment part of EIT Health, which is the EIT Health Service Investment GmbH. And there we focus on the project InvestHealth. So there we really focus on supporting companies to attract investments. That was announced in May. I finally took over in November, so it still took a while to get my successor as a director of business creation, Magda Krakowiak. But that was one event. And the second event, if you are talking about events, Bits and Pretzels. Bits and Pretzels 2022. We teamed up with Roche and were founding partner, co-founding partner, you could say, together with Roche of the Healthtech edition of Bits and Pretzels. Bits and Pretzels is a strong team. They know how to run exciting events, festivals, founders festivals, as you could call it, since quite some time, I think 10 years or so. They had Obama.
Isn't it in Europe the Woodstock of the startup world?
Yes, yeah, you could say so, because it's different, like compared to all the other events, because it's the fun festival approach is like in the center. And for me, the symbol is that in the middle of the whole thing, which is happening in the trade fair Munich, Messe München, in the middle they put like a beer carousel. That's like this antique thing that was most probably positioned at Oktoberfest at some point of time. I don't know. And that's like in the middle of the whole event. And when we were sitting together as founding partners, we realized two things. The first thing is also the representative from Roche and we said, as EIT Health and as Roche, we never could have done such a fun thing. So we are like serious partners and serious contributors. And if we would have done that, people would have loved about us now doing such a silly thing. But with the Bits and Pretzels team and the Bits and Pretzels branding, putting that in the center and having us as serial contributors and as serial partners, I think that was a perfect combination. And then there was a moment when they told us, but please be aware that there will be beer available even in the morning hours. That was like, okay, we didn't expect that, but that's how it is. So bottom line, was an exciting and really very, very special moment to open that first Bits and Pretzels Healthtech together with the other board of creators and managing director of Bits and Pretzels. And we exceeded our expectations. We thought, okay, if we get 1,000 participants, that would be already a lot for the first edition. And we got more than 1,500 people. So now expectations for 2023 are huge, I would say.
You mentioned a couple of things that I would like to dig in deeper now. Beer in the morning. I think it's a Bavarian thing, isn't it? you start a good day with a good beer.
Yeah, especially if you start your morning with white sausages and pretzels. So that's a tradition where you usually should also have a wheat beer for that. But usually that's something for a weekend. So it's not like you would start a working day with. At least not today. Maybe in the past it might have been different 10 years ago, but today that's something for the weekend, I would say.
The meetings must be funny then afterwards when people get their first drinks in the morning. But I think in Bavaria, beer isn't really alcohol, isn't it? I mean, it's more.
So I remember when I worked at the Fraunhofer, when I did my diploma thesis there, during lunch break, you also could order beer. So that's that. I think I'm not sure if that has changed in the meantime, but indeed in Bavaria, it's part of the lifestyle. And if you talk about Oktoberfest, of course, there is beer also served in the morning, but it's getting less. So if you look on construction sites, the workers on a construction site never would drink a beer before they are done with all their work. I think that definitely has changed compared to the past.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the 80s, it was completely different. When I did my summer internships, sometimes at the construction site, it was a little bit different. So there was a lot of fun working back then. Let's dig into the second part that you mentioned, that you run now the, I hope I exaggerate it in the right way, the huge investment arm of EIT Health. Is it the right understanding?
Yes and no. So I have to disappoint you and everyone else who is listening. We are not investing ourselves, or at least not at this point of time. Of course, there's plans to set up a fund that is correlated to us. Of course, we are also having some grant money invested into companies where we get options in return, but mainly we are supporting companies to fundraise and to get in touch, to get connected to the right investors. Of course, we have a European network of experts, but also investors, and also have our recognition. So therefore, people trust us, also investors trust us to select the right companies at the right point of time for the right investors to do the introduction, make the introduction. So I think we are a very valuable partner. Now, 2022 is indeed a tricky year to start with such an endeavor, because on the one hand, there is a huge need for connecting startups and good entrepreneurs with investors, for sure. But at the same time, it got much more challenging than we expected before. So doing investment services and providing connections between investors and startups in 2021 was like you didn't have anything to do. So you just exchanged a few emails and then things just went ahead. Now in 2022, you really could see that investors were keeping back their money for their portfolio companies. So they knew their companies that they would support, and there is not too many investments into new companies. So that really needs convincing arguments. And one of that, and that's a key learning for me in 2022, it's still possible. So it's still possible to raise money and attract money. But one of the core conditions is to already have revenue. So if a startup, if a great entrepreneur doesn't have revenue, it's much harder to attract investment. And as you might imagine, you have experience with the life science ecosystem yourself. In life science, the cash flow and the burn rate is covered in the first 5 to sometimes even 10 years by investors and investments, and not by revenue. So early stage companies have a difficult and hard time at the moment.
Was there really such a huge difference between 2021 and 2022? I read the LinkedIn news flow, and in 2021, I mean, let's say the attitude of the market participants was very, very positive, and they were completely in euphoria, and it looked like we enter a new age. And in 2022, I read a lot of newsletters from Sequoia or Y Combinator in which they warned that times are changing. But on the other hand, I also read from a lot of funds and fund managers and private and public investors, don't worry, there is enough dry powder still in the venture world. Some of those investors are from the All In podcast, for example, US-based investors who say the fundraising success of the venture funds in 2021 was so huge that they must have a lot of money and they are ready to deploy money. And was there really such a huge difference in real investments that happened?
Yes, definitely. So in 2021, there was a lot of money available in the market because same story, investors kept their money back in beginning of 2020 and then started to invest all of that money that they kept for their portfolio companies originally because no one knew how to deal with the crisis. In the end of 2021, that already took up immediately, and then 2020, in the end of 2020, took up immediately in 2021. We saw a huge amount of investment. So I think we even spoke about that in our podcast when you invited me. In 2021, we have seen more than 800 million euro investments alone for EIT Health portfolio companies, wow. Which was doubling compared to the year before. We have seen an increase also compared in a factor before. Between before and 2021, also compared to the US and China. So we have seen more than 10 billion euro of investments into life science or health tech companies, actually Healthtech, which is important, excluding biotech companies, health tech companies in Europe. And that put us even on par with Asia, because Asia was also roughly with 10 billion euro in health tech companies, not that much bigger anymore than it was in the past. So that was a factor of more than 2, I think 2.4 or so increase from 2020 to 2021. So extremely successful. Now we see that this, 2022 is not over and not all deals are announced, but we can see that it got reduced almost by a factor of 2. Not sure what the final number will be, but in the health tech sector, that definitely went back. Now, if your friends tell you there is enough dry powder that still needs to be used, that's true. And that brings us basically to the expectations for 2023. I expect a lot of investments catching up in 2023 because there is money available, but investors are still very, very cautious and careful. So, but they have to, I mean, you know how a fund works. At some point of time, they have to invest. They can't keep it forever. They have to invest. And therefore, if the framework conditions improve in 2023, and I definitely expect so, then we see a lot of investments again at this point of time. But so far, nothing that changed until the end of the year, I would say.
Yeah, we spoke I think it's 2 years ago. It's already 2 years ago that you were on the podcast, and we spoke briefly about the situation in 2016 and 17. And I saw in the latest statistics, without remembering the right numbers, that also in Europe, venture capital took off in the last years. I think we are now almost on par with Asia in all tech sectors, but still a little bit behind the United States, but not as far behind as it was back in 2015, 16, and 17. Right. But I still think there is enough room and leeway for Europe, because in European Union and also the countries outside European Union is twice the size of the United States. So we have still enough room to invest. Which trends do you see in the investment world that will change Europe in the next 2 years?
So, of course, I would focus on the health tech and life science topics, even if, for example, hydrogen and energy is like a super exciting sector that we are seeing catching up, also due to the overall energy situation. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Also, AI in general is still and deep tech. Deep tech is like the new word that is including AI, but also other technologies. In health tech, of course, the digital topics are still super relevant. So we see that we have even biotech companies, pharma companies being super interested into digital health solutions. And I think coming from the European perspective, we have now the right framework conditions for that. So there's two big steps that we took in 2022, actually. Or end of 2021 and beginning of 2022. So we had the DiGAs that were introduced by Jens Spahn, the former German health minister, together with Gottfried Ludwig, his director for innovation. They introduced the DiGAs, which is a reimbursement scheme for digital applications in healthcare. And that model was so successful that the French president, Emmanuel Macron, just decided to replicate that. The decision was taken in 2021, and he announced that at an EIT Health supported event at the Healthtech Innovation Days. Everyone was like between shocked and excited that the French president just says the Germans are doing so great in reimbursement of digital health applications. We won't reinvent the wheel. We will just replicate what they successfully showed. And indeed, the beauty of that is if we apply the same system across Europe, then we can create a singing market for digital health applications.
Can we stop a little bit? We're talking about Europe. Single market for health applications.
Yes. So that's the goal. Wow. We have now two large markets and countries, Germany and France, that are truly collaborating to align the conditions. There's still like little differences. In Germany, you need classification of 2A. In France, it's possible to have even classification 2B, which would not be possible in Germany. In both countries, you have to demonstrate evidence on the impact of your application, but you don't have to show that already at the first day. So you get reimbursement if you show the safety, which is shown through a certification of medical device class A, 2A or 2B, depending on Germany or France. And then you have 12 months to show the impact, and if the impact is shown through real-world evidence, then you can keep the reimbursement. If not, then the reimbursement will be stopped for that health application. So that's an amazing approach. that also drives the innovation in the market. And now we see other countries like Luxembourg, for example, is very far ahead now to get part of that new system. Ireland, we have also other countries like Belgium, also Scandinavian countries that have a similar approach, and where we now have to see how we can align that. But there is a strong movement in that direction, and there is a clear understanding that it would not be smart to have a lot of individual national solutions, but having one joint solution where we also, and that's an important thing, if you get accepted in one market, then it would automatically also be accepted in other markets for reimbursement, so that you have that mutual recognition, and that would open the European single market for digital health applications. That's the big vision, but I think we took a huge step into that direction in 2022.
Yeah, sounds like this is a huge step in Europe to unite the different markets under one umbrella, which is great because it's really holding back when companies, especially startup companies, small companies, need to apply in each single country. It drives the cost and the I would say the resource consumption tremendously. So uniting that is great news. Do you see that also happening in other areas in Europe, that there is a trend to create really a single united market?
Cool. I mean, you see that now with in the energy sector, with a joint approach to buy fuels and gas, and especially also the pricing approach and processes for that. You see that in a couple of areas, but I would say the DiGAs in the Healthtech sector and the digital medical devices, as they are called now in France and Luxembourg, is an amazing step. And the second one for the Healthtech sector that I really want to emphasize is the European health data space. That's something that will prepare us for the future in a way it was never possible before. You all know the GDPR, which was rolled out all over Europe. People usually hate it. Hardly anyone loves it. But I think it was important to have one approach all over Europe. Also, in the current situation that we have with the big dominant players from the US, from Silicon Valley, I think it's important that we have one clear structure in Europe that is applied everywhere in the same way. And by full purpose back then, the EU decided and the Commission decided to not include the topic of healthcare data in the GDPR system. So it would have been a huge opportunity to do so. And there were, of course, from the healthcare sector, people were like asking and requesting that to also include a special treatment of medical data in GDPR. But by full purpose, people have decided to not include it in order to not take the risk that even the whole GDPR would be rejected. So therefore, they agreed, let's put GDPR first, and then let's talk about health data. Now, what is a European health data space? It is not a huge Amazon Web Service cloud or so. It is not a technical solution. The European health data space is just a legal framework with one clear purpose. In that legal framework, the exchange and the type data is collected and is used, is regulated across Europe. So that's basically the main purpose. So how is the data stored? Not from a technical perspective, but from a what is it used for, and how can it be exchanged among countries? And I also like the way how the European Commission has provided their Q&A. So they basically said, they provided 3 examples. And one example is, if a Portuguese person goes to France, then if that lady is on a skiing trip and breaks her legs and needs medication, then it is important to have the data structured in a way that a French medical doctor also understands her allergies and things that he has to know if he's treating her, which is not the case today. So if she's delivered to the hospital, he wouldn't know. And a second example is, if someone goes somewhere else to university hospitals during holidays and has some medical imaging done, maybe with X-rays, which you shouldn't repeat again and again and again due to the nature of X-rays, then usually that data is not exchanged. And the Commission very clearly says it needs to be clear that data can be transferred also from a hospital in one country into another. Currently, data is not even allowed to leave a hospital from one city to the next one within Germany, for example. So that's very clearly governed. But the way how it is then implemented, that is regulated by the countries, by the member states themselves. So the EU just provides the framework. And the second thing that is very relevant from my perspective, it's not just about the patient perspective into the use of data. It's also the way how not the primary use, which is the patient-centric and doctor-centric use, but also the secondary use to drive innovation in Europe, how that is important. And there, I think if you want to catch up with the US, with Asia, then we have the right model to move forward.
That sounds very promising. I think this is in Europe still a little bit tricky that patients cannot take their data at scale with them. I think it's also when I go from one hospital in Vienna to the next hospital, it's also sometimes tricky that the data transfer happens automatically in the background. So I have to go there. As far as I understand the situation, I'm not an expert. I'm just talking from the patient perspective, but it doesn't seem to me that it's already there. And what you said that now data needs to be transferred between countries so that the patient who is going on a holiday somewhere, for example, from the Netherlands in Austria has a ski accident, that the doctor immediately can access the whole health data world of this person and make much better judgments of the situation than without it, especially, for example, when the patient is unconscious. It's really difficult to warn the doctor and say, okay, you need to take care of this, and that. When the doctor can access the whole health data of the person, it's a great thing. Is this really coming?
Yes, I'm absolutely convinced that this is coming. The problem, of course, is the still keeping the data private, because we want to give the power into the hands of the patient. The patient has to be able to follow and see who has accessed my data, because we definitely want to provide security and clarity that, for example, an insurance company cannot access the data to calculate your monthly payment rates, adapting to your risk. So that's explicitly excluded. The European Commission also has taken care of that. So you always can follow who has accessed your data and for which purpose, because that's important. If you couldn't guarantee that, then of course people would be always afraid that someone like checked your data just to do bad things with that, and that's clearly excluded. The question how quickly that will be implemented, the European Commission has provided almost €1 billion, I think 800 million euro for the member states to implement that. How quickly that will happen, I don't know.
Yeah. At least I think I see it as like an entrepreneur, small steps, baby steps. It's the best thing. So one step.
But the direction is clear, and the framework is there. That's the most important, because like 2 years ago we didn't have any framework, and now we have clarity where we want to go. We will see countries that implement that much quicker, and we have other countries that might take a bit longer.
What's your expectations? Which countries will be the quickest, in your opinion, in the adoption? Is there already something started, or are we still in the concept stage?
I would say a safe bet might be Estonia, because they have already everything digitally available. I could imagine that other small countries like Luxembourg that really put a lot of emphasis in managing that transformation could be quick. I would not assume that Germany and Austria would be the fastest one, even if you have great progress with digital medical devices and things like that. The population is still very careful and very afraid about the potential use. So I think there will be much more time needed also to convince the citizens about the advantages and about the security level.
Why is Estonia so far advanced? I mean, there's a lot going on. Every time when you open LinkedIn, I see more and more news about this country. What's the reason why there is the adoption rate so high? What's your opinion on that?
I would say, first of all, it's a small and still an average pretty young population. They didn't have any infrastructure. Just historically, everything was destroyed and taken away. So they had to build up everything from scratch. And therefore, they realized that that the way it was now built up in a purely digital way, it's working very well. So the acceptance rate is huge and is amazing. And if you look into the rejection rates of putting patients' data into national biobanks, I think it's in the low one-digit percentage where people really reject having their data stored in the national biobank. So it's a huge acceptance across the whole population.
That's great. I could go on talking another hour with you. Let's pull Caroline Heil in. She's the next speaker. I see that she's already in. Did you like the episode? Then please, please, please like, comment, and share this episode. And don't forget to smash the subscribe button. It helps tremendously to grow the podcast. And the bigger the audience, the easier it becomes for me to invite speakers to the podcast and deliver valuable information to you. Have a great end of 2022 and a successful start into the new year.